Okay, beginning recording to the cloud now.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Sustainable Landscaping Steering Committee's meeting on sustainable landscaping practices. I'm going to ask Molly Jones to just explain what people who want to use the Spanish language channel should do. Molly, can I turn that over to you? Molly, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. You're unmuted.
Molly, you'll need to switch yourself to the English channel and then back to the Spanish.
Well, Molly is figuring that out. Anna, are you able to maybe tell people that in Spanish that at the bottom of their screen, there's an interpretation icon, and if they click on that, they can hear the presentation in Spanish? Okay, maybe, Christine, we should move on, and we have another opportunity to come back and do that. Thank you. So this meeting is being recorded. It'll be available on our webpage. And we're going to enable the chat to take a quick poll after I have my introductory remarks, and then we'll turn it on again when we get to questions at the end of the presentation. So please either raise your hand or use that for questions that you might have for any of us, or for your comments about the any comments you have about the presentation. Please try to keep your comments relatively brief so that everyone who wants to speak has a chance to do that. Okay. I'm going to read the land acknowledgement. We gather today on the land of the Lenni Lenape. As members of the Princeton community, we aspire to show appreciation, respect, and concern for all peoples and for our environment. We acknowledge the genocide and continuous displacement of Indigenous peoples and the harm inflicted upon the Indigenous communities and people of color across the country. We honor the Lenape and other Indigenous caretakers of these lands and waters, the elders who lived here before, the Indigenous today, and the generations to come. We further acknowledge the millions of enslaved Africans and their descendants on whose backs this nation was created. Just a few ground rules for tonight. So we do want to hear from everyone, want to hear your views, but just so everyone can speak, try to stay focused on the questions that you have. We are presenting some proposals to you tonight. Nothing is finalized. This will be one of many points where members of the public have had an ability to have input on these proposals. So this won't be the last, but please, don't hesitate to speak up and share your points. We hope that everybody learned something from the presentations this evening about the history of this issue and how we got where we are. Next slide, please. So we're going to enable the chat for this quick poll. If you can identify which category you fall into here. You're a Princeton resident that takes care of your own yard, a landscaping company owner that does business in Princeton, a crew member that works in Princeton, etc. And just put that into the chat, and we'll be looking at those responses, and we'll get a sense of who's here. And I'll give people just a minute or two to do that. All right, you can keep filling in. Molly, okay. So Molly, do you want to talk about how to gain access to the Spanish language channel? You're unmuted, but I can't hear you. All right, I'm gonna move on. Sorry, Molly. Let's move on. So what the purpose of this meeting is, it's an opportunity for residents to learn about and discuss the proposed changes to noise pollution and other ordinances that affect how landscaping is done by both residents, property owners, and landscaping companies in Princeton. And I'm going to be turning this over. We have a next slide, I think, at this point. Okay, again, for Spanish language, but these are the speakers you're going to be hearing from tonight. Christine Symington from Sustainable Princeton, Ana Pazmino from Unidad Latina en Acción, Tony Lunn from Quiet Princeton, Tammy Sands from Princeton Environmental Commission, and then I'll come back on with just a brief synopsis of what the proposals are that will be presented hopefully to council in the next couple of months. So Christine, do you want to take it away?
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. As you've mentioned, I'm the program director at Sustainable Princeton, and I wanted to start by sharing the public engagement that's happened to date with respect to this project to help our town transition to more sustainable landscaping. The real public engagement started in the beginning of this year. In coordination with the Princeton Public Library, Sustainable Princeton, and its project partners, held a public meeting on January 13th to introduce the project and the activities we were going to be doing over the course of the year. We gave an update to the public on April 21st. And since then, there have been a number of updates, including introduction of the ordinance proposals by the Environmental Commission that happened in April, May, and June. So this meeting tonight is just one in a series of public engagement activities that we've had. One specific type of engagement event that we had was a Sustainable Landscaping Mini Expo at the Princeton Shopping Center on April 24th, where folks had the ability to check out what the latest is in battery powered equipment, as well as other ways to manage your property more sustainably. So while this project is as much about equipment that's used to manage our properties, as much about the practices we use to manage our properties. It's also about the project partners working together to try to make our community a more equitable community. And there's a recognition in the environmental and sustainability community that it has not done enough to address inequities in our society. So that, with the increase in community interest in doing something about landscaping practices and the types of equipment that are used, a bunch of community partners put a proposal together and was awarded a grant from Partners for Places organization to specifically work on a project, an equitable sustainability project that serves people who are impacted by the systems of oppression and injustice, economic disadvantage, environmental harm, and where they are co-creators and leaders and partners in implementing and designing solutions, and where all the partners are committed to addressing institutional and systemic racism and equitable outcomes. So the project partners have included Unidad Latina en Acción New Jersey, Quiet Princeton, Latin American Legal and Defense and Education Fund, members of the Rutgers School of Public Health, as well as Eve Niedergang as the council liaison, Tammy Sands is the chair of the Environmental Commission, representatives from the Board of Health, the Civil Rights Commission, and the Human Services Commission. We've had support from a consulting firm called MAPA Collaborative, as well as Maria Wega, who's a Princeton advocate and has provided interpretation services. One of the tools that we've been using is Princeton Civil Rights Commission's Racial Equity Impact Assessment Toolkit. And out of that toolkit is a recommendation that has been particularly resonant with this project. That is that we believe it's essential to consult and get the perspective of impacted communities, particularly historically marginalized communities, in the development of programs and policies. Another tool that we've been using throughout the process is this power analysis tool. This is a way to make sure that you are actively engaging and prioritizing the people in your community who are most impacted by a policy or a program, but have the least influence and the least access. And this third tool that we've been using has been helping us to understand better what that engagement should be like. And moving from the left side of this graphic here, where you're going from just simply informing members of the public who are historically excluded, to empowering them, to have them to be part of the creation and design of solutions. So with that in mind, we've spent the first 6 and 7 months of this project actively engaging with the landscaper community. And even before the project started, we had gone about sending a survey out to landscaper company owners and crew to get a sense of how many are doing business in Princeton, what their operations are like, what type of health and safety practices they were employing. We received 21 responses, 16 in English and 5 in Spanish. So that was a good initial foundational knowledge of the community members that we wanted to be engaging with further. Then in the first part of this year, we had 2 focus groups with landscaping community. First was with landscape company owners, and the second was with crew members. These were done entirely in Spanish, and these were really listening sessions. And as follow-up to that, to go even deeper into our engagement effort, we had 3 in-person meetings with Spanish-speaking owners and crew members, and then as well as non-Spanish-speaking council. Anna, I think you might have your, need to mute yourself there. In the meeting on the 16th, we brought in elected officials, the mayor, to hear directly from the landscape company owners and crew. And then we had a final meeting in person on the 23rd. And we have upcoming on August 24th, a workshop for landscape company owners and crew from organization called AGSA, and that will be for the public or private landscaping companies, as well as the municipalities, public works, grounds crew, maintenance crew, and the Princeton Public Schools grounds maintenance crew. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ana Paula Pesmina from Unidad Latina en Acción.
Apologize, Christine, for talking. I was interpreting, but then I guess there's been some technical issues. But I think we're going to have translation and interpreting now from Maria. And I just want to tell my viewers who speak Spanish. So, compañeros, gracias por estar aquí. Estábamos teniendo una dificultad con la traducción y con la intérprete, pero ya ha llegado. Entonces, sintonicen a español en el canal de español para que ustedes puedan escuchar mi presentación y las otras presentaciones que van a suceder por medio del canal de español. Okay, thank you so much. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming on today and listening to our project. My name is Ana Pazmino. I am working with Unidad Latina en Acción. We're a grassroots migrant justice organization, and we have three main objectives and missions here: to educate, empower, and organize. We do all types of social work, but we mainly focus on immigrant rights and workers' rights. And so in part of our work here is to make sure that our workers and our families are being given dignified jobs. And part of the jobs that our community workers do is landscaping. So we've come together to work with Sustainable Princeton and other orgs in Princeton who have also that mission for environmental justice. So if we could go on to our campaigns, we are working with health and safety for workers. And during the pandemic, we realized that there's a lot of need for workers' safety, not only because of COVID, but because we were seeing that there's a lot of relation to how much exposure and risk workers were having because of substances, because of the environmental noise and the environmental machinery that's part of the work that the landscaper companies have, right? So that's where we fall with Sustainable Princeton. And our campaign here is to involve the voices of the workers, of the owners. We work with the Latinx community, but we know that there's a lot of landscaping companies that are non-Spanish speaking that also have the same issues. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So if we can go on to the next slide, I just want to let you know how we tie into all of this in Unidad Latina. So we do a lot of the workshops for health and safety. We go to rallies and marches where we ask for policies and any type of relief that can help our communities. We also have been partnering with Mutual Aid, which is Princeton Mutual Aid, with the food distribution, and having our domestic workers who are also clearly tied to the day labor and landscaping workers, because there too, their rights have been neglected. And then our most recent workshops, which we do them 2 to 3 times a month. And we just had one on the 26th, and we're having virtual ones where we include warehouse workers, landscapers, construction workers. But all of this ties into the needs of environmental justice, because without that, without the sustainable practices that we need to educate each other, we won't be able to do that with the health and the safety of all the workers, really, not just landscaping. And so as our work started, like Christine mentioned, we were doing some focus groups. And when we had these focus groups, you could see here some really great images of how we collaborated. We had the mayor attend, we had council, members of the council come over and listen, residents, workers, like I mentioned, we were able all to collaborate a little bit, give that voice to those that maybe would have not known anything if we wouldn't have had these focus groups. And from the focus groups, we came on to take out a little bit of the essential stuff that we heard. We divided the groups into a focus group for the Hispanic-owned landscaping companies, and then the Hispanic crew members, which are the workers that might be independent contractors working for residents seasonally. Then we got from our small Hispanic owned landscaping companies that there was a need for making sure that the cost of the equipment was one of the variants that we looked at, the expectations of how the homeowners were going to react to using sustainable machinery. We wanted to create an ordinance that was fair, didn't really make that classism an issue. So they were concerned that an ordinance could do that. Also, being heard and included in the decision-making process was very essential. That was like one of their asks. And then they were concerned about how the increase in prices could either hit them financially or make the homeowners' preferences vary, and perhaps it could be a negative impact. For the crew members, when we did the focus groups, we also asked some of the same questions. What were their worries? And many of them are worried to the exposure of harmful substances. Also, the use of the machinery. When we start now, and you'll get to see a little bit and hear about this in a couple of minutes. But when we talk about the education of this, they're very excited to learn about sustainable practices and sustainable machinery, right? So their concerns are alike. And I mentioned that the fear of the increase of cost, the workers were also fearful that the increase in the prices would result in the possibility of them losing their hours or jobs, so they'd have fewer jobs. And some of the unfair treatment, because this might cause classism and unfair treatment by the owners, the homeowners, depending on who is affected. And something that I'll focus on a lot, and I mentioned a couple of times, is how the voices are heard, how they are able to voice their concerns. So these focus groups really allowed us to do that, allowed the community and those that might have been silenced to come out and say something. And from this, we took a couple of quotes. which is what our workers have said, and to pinpoint the importance of having the workers' voices heard, and now publicly, you guys also are able to see that many of these workers, landscapers, are they're professionals. They take this job very seriously. They take this job as something that they have to learn more about, educate themselves. They're saying we need to educate ourselves in order to educate the homeowners. Having a better planet is something global, not only for citizens or adults, it's a matter for everyone. So although we've come to this country, if we live and work here, this is our home. We can do we can do things together, and we can invest and help our community by giving jobs, right? So the owners and the crew members clearly want to be part of this, because this not only affects the environment, but they see themselves and this community as theirs. For another quote that we have, where we're talking about how the workers see themselves, and they're saying that in the job, saying that the salary is taken into account for them because gardening is not easy. The work is hard and the payment is very little, and there are many hours. So a little bit of attention to how much this might impact the salaries. And of course, another worker mentioned, if we don't know the laws and the rules and we don't have the knowledge, there are so many things that can happen to us. We must value our lives. And this, comes into play, that we understand how much these workers are professionally looking at landscaping. They want to learn about the new ordinances, what has been in place already, what they have to do to register to be a landscaping company or a landscaping contractor, and really making sure that they're also not making good knowledge of this to pass on to their clients, the residents, and making sure that their lives are not at risk. Because we all love to work, but we want to be able to work dignified, in a dignified position. So that's our voice of our workers. And Unidad Latina en Acción has had the pleasure of collaborating. And I think that we have learned, and we hope to continue to learn more and collaborate on environmental issues and workers' rights. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. I am Tony Lunn, a co-founder of Quiet Princeton. As you can tell, our town is putting a lot of effort into this whole business of landscaping, and I think we're doing a better job than almost any other town or city in the country that we know of. So we should be very proud of what we're doing. I have just a few minutes, and I'm going to talk about the aspects of proposed changes that will directly affect you, the public. There will be a variety of other changes of secondary effect, but I'm going to focus particularly on the major area. I'm going to talk first about gasoline leaf blowers, how they have impacted landscaping, and what we can and should do about it. As you know, they're used very intensively nowadays, and they have issues of a variety of things. One of them is social justice, which Anna has just been talking about, and other ones which I shall get into. But why gas leaf blowers in particular? Well, they are the most common two-stroke engine device that we have, the most frequently used. Two-stroke engines, as I shall say briefly, are particularly highly polluting. Point one. Point two is that they have led to a what I call leave no leaf behind kind of landscaping. Next slide, please, Christine. Princeton has been agonizing about this for a quarter of a century, during which time the intensity of use has increased, as this picture shows, and the harms are now very well known. Since COVID, more people have been at home and have been experiencing the disruption to their lives created by the noise pollution and the air pollution. And as a result of this, we actually have hundreds of residents in the town who would like a complete ban on these devices. We aren't there at this point today. But many other towns in New Jersey and around the country are taking action. Christine, next slide. Number one, noise pollution. We all know that they're very, very loud. They do actually create hearing damage, and the people who get this the most are the operators. Second, they have a kind of low frequency noise which is very penetrating, which is why even when you close your doors and windows, you can still hear them. And it carries for a very significant distance and affects a large number of people, especially if multiple devices are used. Next slide. Air pollution is quite surprising. I'm sure you all know about the noise pollution, but the air pollution is much worse than you might imagine. And just a few anecdotes to illustrate that. An hour of use of one of these backpack GLBs, as I will call them, emits more smog-forming pollution than a sedan driving for 20 hours, 1,000 miles. They also emit tiny particulates that go straight into the lungs and cause death and disease, and that exacerbates COVID also. 1 million people around the world die every year from PM 2.5 particulates. But there's more. 30% of the gasoline actually goes straight into the air unburned. That's because they're highly inefficient engines. Even fuel spillage is significant. You'd be surprised at that too. So the problem is not a trivial one. And another way to illustrate that is that the smog-forming pollution of these devices now exceeds the amount that automobiles generate. Automobiles are very, very tightly regulated and have very, very modest levels of pollution now. These devices are almost totally unregulated and have extremely high levels. Can you imagine that they're worse than cars? Next slide, please. Okay. Anna has been making some very good points about the social justice aspects of this. And indeed, the people who are most directly exposed, the workers operating the machinery, are the ones who have the highest exposure to the noise pollution and the air pollution. This must be urgently addressed. There are definitely issues with financial aspects. Some company owners may need financial help to make a switch, but these devices are cheaper in the long run. But we must make sure that the hundreds of workers and the tens of thousands of residents of the town who are in need of relief are paid proper attention to. Next slide. Let me talk a little bit, but this is going to be very brief, about what these devices have created. I have called this plastic landscaping. Some of us are quite used to it. But think about it a minute. The lawn has not a single leaf on it, at least for a day after the landscapers have come. The mulching has absolutely no leaves, no underbrush. There's no life. There's no nutrition there. The bushes might as well have been fabricated in a factory. This is not a natural thing. The natural ecosystem with a healthy soil, birds, butterflies, other things that live in the soil are literally blown away. This was not possible until very, very powerful blowers were actually invented. Next slide, please. There are things that we can do to change things. I call them paradigm shifts. You don't need to blow the leaves on the left away with a blower. They were mulched in with a mower, and practically all of them have gone. Next slide, please. In the longer term, we can gradually start to consider changing some of our lawns into things that don't need mowing, let alone blowing at all. And so some examples are here. But we can talk a long time about this, but not this evening. Next slide, please. What can we do instead? We can also replace the devices with battery electric power. The lovely thing about this, and as we all know, battery electric things have become very common now. They are quieter, of course, although they still make some noise. And they're cheaper in the long run. Cheaper in the long run. We have all electric landscaping companies already operating here. Our Quiet Princeton website has a few. Initial investment is required by the landscaper. Fortunately, the leaf blowers are one of the cheapest things they have to buy, compared with the mowers and the trucks and the trailers. The leaf blowers and other handheld equipment is a small percentage of the overall cost, so it's not an insuperable thing if it's dealt with appropriately, and we need to do that. But I would like to emphasize, we don't want to replace 1 hour of gasoline leaf blower with 1 hour of electric leaf blower. We need to do some changes in the way we do landscaping, as the previous few slides have indicated. So finally, the next slide. What you're going to be hearing about a little bit more from Tammy and from Eve is a proposed seasonal ban. This is what landscapers have actually agreed they can manage even right now without changing anything in their equipment. So it's a beginning step. There will be some fines. It will be very important to pay attention to enforcement, but also to education, information. Tell all the members in the town and all of the landscapers that these changes are coming, therefore people can make adjustments. We estimate in Quiet Princeton that this seasonal ban, which will be in the summer months but not in the spring and fall cleanups of leaves, will reduce noise pollution and air pollution by about 25%. Why is it so low? Well, because the intensive use is in the fall, and we're still going to allow that at the moment. So this is a great start, but we will need more. We need a lot of education, as I mentioned. We need to learn that we're not going to simply replace GLBs with ELBs, and we need to, as Tammy will mention, work towards future steps which involve more restrictions than now. So next slide, please. I will now be glad to pass it on to Tammy Sands, the chair of the Environmental Commission.
Thank you, Tony. And good evening, everyone. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us this evening. It's important to hear everyone's voices. As you can see from the presentations before mine, the need for sustainable landscaping practices, it's not new, right? It's been pollution has been, happening from our current landscaping practices, and it comes in many forms, as Tony mentioned, the air, the noise, but also our soils, right? And also our water. So not to forget about gasoline being, dropped into the earth and how that absorbs into our water. Also pointed out was about our outdated super manicured landscaping practices, as Tony fondly refers to as our plastic landscaping practices, right? So it's no wonder that for decades, Princeton residents have expressed multiple concerns about related issues. And some of those issues may even be something like flooding and stormwater, for an example, right? From leaves that are piled that are blocking inlets. When past ordinance efforts failed, Tony mentioned 25 years ago, right? Princeton Environmental Commission recognized that sustainable landscaping practices were and continue to be imperative to our community and our environment. And so they developed guidelines such as the fall leaf management guideline, other resources like the Princeton invasive species management, and the strike team do not plant list. They've been available as resources for quite some time, but predominantly remain without implementation. And so guidelines and resources and campaigns really simply haven't been effective enough. So as Anna mentioned, we've been presented with the opportunity, right, for landscapers to be heard and to be part of the solution. And that's what we're asking for you tonight as well, to give input so we can all be part of the solution. How do we get there, right? So expressing our concerns about, health or the health of our environment, also the associated costs and the effectiveness of equipment in the area. And then as a town, I think that we have a responsibility to protect the health of our people and the planet. So how should we achieve sustainable landscaping practices together? And Christine, you can go to the next slide, please. So PEC's recommended path to sustainable landscaping practices in Princeton starts with this year, right? So looking at our first step, and I really want to iterate that, yes, it's our first step in a transition to landscaping. This first step where we consider balanced and that it doesn't create hardship right away, that we actually have time to transition. So our first step for the community is the PEC looked at existing ordinances. So what do we already have in place as our laws, and looking where we might be able to amend those. So there's 4 different things that we're looking at, and that's the landscaping registration, looking at things that the landscapers helped us actually come to fruition about the changes. The noise, so looking at the noise, and then requesting that there be reevaluation of the leaf, branch, and log program collection, as well as our general provisions, right? So violations and penalties, but using that in a way to educate and provide tools, resources first. And Eve will get into a lot of these details. That's what she's going to present, kind of the details in regard to what PEC's recommendations are. Then for next year, what we're hoping to do is, and recommending to do, is to really look at a sustainable landscaping ordinance, so a new one that specifically addresses all elements of sustainable landscaping so that it's comprehensive. In that comprehension, it would include maybe some gas-powered equipment, right? So the other intent to transition other pieces of equipment to electric. As Tony mentioned, there are those other 2-cycle engines that are very detrimental to health. And then other sustainable landscaping practice, as we heard from Anna, right? The workers are concerned about being exposed to different toxins and chemicals. And so looking at those elements, our use of our toxic sprays, our pesticides, our fertilizers, invasive plants, right? And how that can really be detrimental to our community, as well as the destruction of our trees, specifically to stormwater. And then in 2023, looking at that, reassessing that ordinance, that new rule that we came up with, and seeing, how we can work anything out, refine it, you could say. And also making sure that we look at it in relation to the climate action plan, right? So those goals and objectives of the town's climate action plan, to ensure that we look at the private and public lawn maintenance equipment that has been addressed and everything's going smoothly. So now I'd like to hand it over to Eve so she can talk about the details.
Thank you, Tammy, Tony, Anna, Christine. So I'm going to be pretty brief and just highlight what this group has agreed on for our suggestions for action for this year. So Christine, next slide, please. So we have really a couple of different areas. The first, as Tammy alluded to, and this was something that really comes directly from the landscapers who've been involved with this process. Landscape owners want all landscaping company owners want all landscaping companies to have to play by the same rules. So everybody needs to provide proof that they have workman's compensation, because if you are a landscape company owner who decides not to provide that, you can undercut the prices of landscape companies that are playing by the rules. And from the perspective of the workers, of course, they want to be sure that their employer has workman's compensation and other insurance. So if they get injured, they will be protected and have the health care and support that they're entitled to. So I'm not going to go into all the details of the changes to the landscaper registry, but that is really an important element of this first effort. Next slide, please. So here are the proposed regulations for leaf blowers and chainsaws. We include chainsaws. Again, this was something that was suggested by the landscapers, that what should be penalized is the use of equipment that is loud and disruptive. And chainsaws, although not used with the frequency or intensity of gas leaf blowers, are indeed two-stroke engines that are very loud and emit the same harmful air and noise pollution that gas leaf blowers do. So the proposal for this year is a seasonal allowance for gas leaf blowers in the fall. Current proposal October 15th to December 15th, and spring, March and April. Electric leaf blowers, although they do emit noise, their noise does not travel as far or penetrate as deeply, and nor are the emissions, the air pollution emissions, as bad. So those would be allowed. Where current quiet hours in Princeton begin at end at 8 a.m. For the most part, although some construction does begin earlier, and currently ends at 10 p.m. So we're shortening the time Monday to Friday that leaf blowers and chainsaws can be used in the evening hours. We've had some conversations with our landscaping partners on what appropriate hours would be on Saturday, and we're hoping to constrain those in the afternoon a little bit more, again, to provide some more quiet time for our residents. But we don't have a firm fix on that yet, so we're leaving that a little vague for now. The landscapers are willing to give up the potential for work on Sunday. There is a strong feeling that everybody deserves a day off. So we're proposing that gas leaf blowers and chainsaws are not allowed on Sunday or federal holidays. Next slide, please. So the ordinance would include fines, and the fines would apply to both the property owner or resident and the landscaping company, if relevant, if you use a landscaping company. The fines will increase. So the first one, again, the landscapers had proposed that the first violation be a warning with no fine. And since we're really trying to do this as an education effort rather than an effort that is punitive, we think that that's great. So the first ticket issued or penalty would be purely a warning. And then after that, there will be fines that are imposed, with the ultimate penalty for a landscaping company after multiple violations would be that they would no longer be registered and legally able to work in Princeton. We are working on what the enforcement and reporting mechanisms will be. We don't have that firmly established yet. It's very important that it not, again, be a punitive structure, but one that embraces the idea of education, as Tony referred to. This is a paradigm shift. This is not simply, I'm not going to use the gas leaf blower, but I'm going to continue the same practices. What we really hope is that people will begin to view their property, their lawn, as a small ecosystem, and that they care for it in a way that encourages the flourishing of our native species, of pollinators, and of proper ways of dealing with stormwater, not, for example, putting your leaves in the storm drain, which is not the appropriate way to deal with your leaves. And so we expect that this is going to be a transition that's going to take some time, and we're all learning. I personally compare to, how I thought about this 2 or 3 years ago, and it's a world of difference. And I think that'll be true for many people. I think we all want a healthier planet, healthier workers. And this is one way that we can start movement toward that. I think that is it. Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't it. So once we pass the ordinance, which we are hoping will be sometime this fall, the hours portion and days of use, so the more limited hours during the week, more limited hours on Saturday, no gas leaf blowers, chainsaws on Sunday, would take effect as soon as the ordinance has passed. However, the proposed changes in the seasons, months of use would not take effect until after this upcoming leaf blowing season, so to speak. And I just want to address also something that Tony touched on, and maybe somebody else as well, which is another avenue that we're pursuing and trying to get the attention of people at the state and county level is, and also hopefully a private fundraising campaign, is support for this transition from gas to electric. Because even though, as Tony said, we don't want people doing an hour of electric leaf blowing for every hour of gas leaf blowing, there is a proper role for a small amount of use of this equipment. And it's important for landscapers at this point as we transition to a new paradigm. And so we want to be able to support them. We can't make any promises. We don't have any, no one has offered us a lot of money, but it's certainly something we're pursuing and would like to be able to provide. And that is it. So I'm just going to go over, the ground rules again. You can put a question in the chat. You can raise your hand and Adam can bring you on to speak. Again, this is a discussion. We don't all have to agree, but we'd love to hear different points of view and the reasons for why you think we should do things a particular way. And we hope that everyone who has not been following this process closely has learned something tonight. And I think we're all learning how to do this better. And all right, I think why don't we bring on any people who have questions and
Okay.
take it from there.
Just want to
First,
let folks know that Anna had to leave. If anyone has specific questions for her, we'll make sure we get them to her and get your response. She had a work meeting she had to attend.
Thank you, Christine.
all right, let's bring in Paul Kelly.
Paul, you can unmute yourself and speak. You're still muted.
In your lower screen, you should be able to unmute and also show your
I
video.
did unmute it, so can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can. Thank you.
I'm wondering why Princeton isn't using other communities as a template to go forward with this. And it seems like there's a lot of emphasis on kowtowing to the landscapers and the landscaping companies rather than to the residents who are subject to this noise and this pollution?
I'm happy to answer that, and maybe some of our other panelists want to as well. So one of the ways, so I'll say, I meant to say this at the beginning, we are not going to be the first town in Princeton or the country to pass this type of ordinance. And I know I saw Grace Sinden, who is a member of the I think health board many years ago when this was attempted to pass, and it did not pass. So we're not going to be the first, but I think we are the first to approach this with racial and social justice as a really prime emphasis on this. And I know that that will not be as fast. The impact of that is that we're not going to move as fast as many people want. And are there more residents than there are landscapers? Yes, that's absolutely true. But I think what we're trying to do, and I'm really very proud of us for doing this, it's not easy. It involves a lot of compromise and a lot of soul searching and a lot of hard work. But what we're trying to do is move ahead in a process in which people who usually do not have any say, do not have any political power, their voices are heard too. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's why the process is moving slowly. As I said, many other communities have passed leaf blower bans, either in New Jersey or outside of New Jersey, but none of them have done it with attention to what the impact will be on the landscapers who live and work in their communities. And personally, that doesn't feel right to me. And that's why we're doing it this way. And that's why the process will be slower than in other communities that are not doing it this way. Does anyone want to add? Any of the other panelists want to add?
I could give a little more detail about, what the landscape companies we've been engaging with are like. They are small companies with perhaps one owner and 2 or 3 crew members. We're not talking about the large national or regional chains, which we assume have access to capital, have the ability to more easily to change, who are English speaking, who have access, and the system is designed, for them to be able to have their voices heard. We're really focusing on the small companies that the crew members are our neighbors. They live in the community, or they live in nearby communities. Some of the owners live in our community. So they are not just some outside group, they are our neighbors and our valued community members too.
Tony, did you?
Education all around may be very important here. We have heard from some of the landscapers. Some of them are concerned that the homeowner might insist that they continue to do it in the old way. And some of the landscapers may be intimidated into not observing the ordinance. This is obviously something that needs to be corrected, but it needs to come from both sides. We have to make sure that our residents and homeowners behave in proper ways and do respect the new planned changes and help the landscapers to change.
Thank you. Adam, you want to bring on the next? Thank you, Paul, for your question.
Sure. Next, we have Alice.
Alice, if you want to unmute.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much for doing this. This really, I would have loved this to happen years and years ago. And I take, Tony's point about educating residents of Princeton, because we have so much of this plastic landscaping, as he says, and so many people who seem to feel that if their grass is not just 1.5 inches tall by a measurement, they go around with their nose in the ground, checking that their grass is a certain height. And then people with the click fix, they go around saying, oh my gosh, the grass was so high and so-and-so's lawn, this is looking terrible. it reminds me of when I toured Yugoslavia, and I was told by the people in Yugoslavia, this is with the Soviet kind of, corruption there, that they said that homeowners were not allowed to plant beans because it looked messy for the tourists. I see no point in people judging other people's lawns. I'm all for, letting things grow if they want to grow. In the spring, if there are wildflowers in your yard, don't go mowing them down. We've always waited. And Bruce has always been mulching all the leaves into the lawn because it's good for the lawn. It's good for the bugs. It's good for, everything. And all the animals, we have lots and lots of animals around in our yard. We have at least one family of rabbits that live under a particularly bushy kind of area in our front yard. And we see them all the time. They watch us coming up and down the steps of our front porch, and this is wonderful. Squirrels, we give them peanuts, and of course they've been eating cicadas lately, so they're having fun with that, or have been. And then we have some round brown creature that I'm not sure quite what it is, and then a few foxes as well, and a raccoon, at least one raccoon, and then lots and lots of birds, and they love all this. So we're trying to keep our area as natural as possible. And actually the National Wildlife Federation has a little sign that you can get that says we are a refuge for wildlife, and you have to promise that you have a source of water for animals and that you're keeping all your bushes nice and bushy and the undergrowth nice and undergrowthy, so that the animals have places to live and hide. And this should be the educational thing that Tony spoke about. I think it's super important that people don't seem to think that if they're not keeping their plastic landscape looking yard, that this is what it means to be a homeowner in Princeton, that you should be able to have a nice wild yard with things growing in it and animals that are happy. This is good. We've been doing this for a long time. So anyway, I just think that's super important, this whole educational thing.
Well, Alice, thank you for being ahead of the game in this one and leading the way. And you have a beautiful yard that really just epitomizes, I think, where we want to go.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And I'll tell Bruce had to be someplace else right now. He's helping somebody who's disabled, so he couldn't be here tonight, but I will pass that on to him. He'll be very happy that all our efforts are appreciated by at least some people, and some of them probably
Many animals and some people.
Yes. But it's got to be more people. We need more people to do this. It's better for everybody. It's better for people. Oh, I forgot to say another thing is the pesticide issue, because I used to use mulch from that place out, and I've forgotten where it is, but I was always worried that people had been spraying their trees and spraying their grass. And then when I'm picking up mulch, I'm putting some of their toxic stuff down on my own property. So I've sort of ceased doing that because I worry, what other people are putting on their stuff that then gets collected up in all the leaves and grass and stuff that are carted out to this pesticide full laden, dump, and then people go and use it on their own property. So that's a danger too. And
I think, Alice, I'm gonna ask you to stop and let's move on to the next
Yeah,
person. But
sure.
as Tammy mentioned, that is definitely something we want to
Absolutely,
take up in the
right.
future.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Second the motion, right? Okay, thank you.
All right, and Adam, you can bring on the next person.
Okay, next we have Janet.
Janet, now you should be able, oh, there you go.
Yeah. I also,
We can hear you, Janet. Thank you.
okay, I just wrote a great long, by the way, I want to congratulate everyone who's worked so hard on this from all sides. I can't believe how much you're all doing, mostly as volunteers. And thank you for this start. I want to say two things. I think that this is our shot to do something for sustainable landscaping. I think nothing else beyond this will happen for another quarter of a century. So I would really go as far as you possibly can on this. I also want to make a comment that I think there are not that many leaves on the ground anymore by October 15th. I think November 1st makes more sense. and the leaves that have fallen between October 15th and November 1st could be easily mulched into the ground and handled by electric leaf blowers. Those are 2 more weeks of lovely peace that we will have, and that will not be a hardship on landscapers. And that's all I have to say. But I would say this is what we're going to get for the next several decades. Let's
Well,
get.
Thank you, Janet. I hope you're wrong about that. I feel like all of us here are very committed to, to moving forward with this and really see this as a first step. Regarding the actual months for both spring and fall, we're reaching out again to our landscape companies to try to get a consensus from them. Of course, climate change is happening. So
Yep.
maybe you're right that we're not getting a lot of leaves between October 15th and November 1st. So we're in the midst of doing a survey. So we'll have good data, good metrics, I think was the word of the day, to drive that proposal.
I know from the level of noise of leaf blowers, the big push is really the week before November. And that's when everybody is out blasting away. So I think November 1st should give people time. It would be wonderful to get 2 more weeks reprieve. Thank you. I don't know how you, I don't know how you mute me. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I'm muting.
I think
myself.
Adam will take care of that. Thank you.
Okay.
If I may.
Oh, sure.
Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you very much, Janet. You've been a supporter of this effort for a long time. If this is all that happens for the next quarter of a century, I think we will have failed. This is, I tried to indicate, and I think some of the others have, that this is a first step. But I agree with you that if we do this, then there is a danger that a year from now people will say, well, why do you want to do more? You've already got a ban on these devices. So we have to be careful about planning the future stages, because as I indicated, and this is just a back of the envelope estimate, we're probably reducing the noise and pollution onslaught by about a quarter. We're not cutting it in half, let alone 90%. So we all, I think that the citizenry can keep everybody's feet to the fire on this one.
Thank you, Tony.
And I just like to say that I feel that we made great strides, right? So we started this at the end of last year, and with the way the process goes, to even get to an ordinance and get to this point with actually voices that aren't typically heard, having them come along with us is absolutely fantastic, right? So we can't forget about that positive piece. And I can't agree more that this is a first step. It really is. And it's not just about gas leaf blowers. I just want to say that now. It's about sustainable landscaping practices. So there'll be other elements involved in that. So just to talk on a little bit of a positive too.
Thank you, Tammy.
Yeah, and I want to echo that as well. Whatever change is proposed to happen next, that if we want to be a more equitable community, then the people in our community that have been historically excluded should be part of the decision-making process. And it takes time to build the trust and the relationships with those groups so that they feel that they have a safe space to participate. And we want to make sure we're doing that along the way while we're reaching towards this more sustainable landscaping paradigm that we want to have.
Thank you, Christine. Adam, do we have more people with their hands up?
Yes, we do. We have 5 more hands at this time. So we'll bring in Scott.
Scott, you can unmute yourself.
Hi.
You're good to go. We can hear you.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. I was wondering whether you guys have done any research into what percentage of the population you think is going to be responsive to this. In other words, there are I can't remember, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 households and residences in the town. There are many unengaged homeowners, absentee homeowners, institutional homeowners, et cetera, that have, no interest in this because their minds are elsewhere. And as a result, even if you try to engage with them on a rational basis, they're not going to be there. And if you try to find them, they're not going to be there either, because they may be landlords who've got no responsibility for the property. They may be institutions that are exempt from from our regulation, like state universities, and the like. And the same thing goes on the landscaper side, where you've got I have no idea how you're going to ever assess what percentage of the crews you've got that are registering when you have so many different disparate types of trucks that are running around. So have you tried to look into this? And the other side of the coin on that would be other towns have already started this effort, and what's their experience? Have you looked into their experience on this? But the most important one is, have you done any attempt to measure that?
So I'm going to say a few things and then turn it over to Christine to talk a little bit about our outreach to homeowners and about our institutional partners. But let me just address, Scott, a little bit about enforcement. So one possibility that we're looking at, although nothing I'm saying here is definitive, it's just a possibility, is and I'll say that our landscaping partners were okay with this, is to use something like Access Princeton to report violations. And what that could mean is one could take a video of somebody who's using a gas leaf blower at a time and day when they're not supposed to be using it, and submit that. I had a conversation with our attorney this morning, and their legal's take is that this would then require a mandated court appearance, which is a real disincentive, I think, to anyone to have to take time out of their day to go to court when they receive a summons in the mail, quite apart from whether or not there's a substantial fine involved. We're also really hoping, and not only on this issue, but for example, on our recycling. How do we get people to comply with recycling? We're thinking of restarting our composting program. How do we get people to comply with that? So all of these things are things that we really are going to be looking at in terms of getting someone similar to, I don't know if you know Taylor Sapruta, our arborist, when somebody wants to take down a tree in Princeton, they need to get permission from the arborist. And that can often be an opportunity for the arborist to provide education about why it's important to retain this large old tree, and how much more stormwater is removed by that than would be removed by the 3 saplings that you might plant in replacement. So we're hoping that the enforcement will be an opportunity for our residents to learn. And I'm only really talking about, residents and landscapers here. And as I said, I'm going to let Christine talk a little bit about outreach to our homeowners and also our institutional partners. And as far as I know, nobody in town would be exempt from this ordinance, except the municipality, which is exempt from all its own rules, but we'll take care of that internally. So our institutional partners, schools, university would not be exempt. And yes, I see ask for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. But again, if you get a summons in the mail and you have to go to court, that's a real hassle. So I don't know how many people are going to just shrug that off, because at the very least, that's probably a couple of hours out of your busy day at a time not of your choosing. So, but anyway, Christine.
Yeah, what we all recognize is that, residents, and not just residents, all property owners, whether you're commercial or institutional, need to play a role in changing how they manage their property. And, one of the things Sustainable Princeton can do is really work hard on that outreach, not just at the residential level, but with the institutions and commercial property owners around town. We know that in itself is not enough. You need a combination of policy, education, management, all kinds of things to come together that will help move it forward. I think you had a comment or a question, Scott, about landscaping companies. And in 2014, the town did pass that landscaping companies that are doing business in Princeton do need to be registered. And we recognize that registration requirement needs to be managed better. There needs to be more oversight of that. And that is a mechanism by which you can ensure that they're aware of what the rules are and they have the information they need to comply with them. When we tried to get an understanding of just, how many landscaping companies are doing business in Princeton, we looked at a couple of different sources, like the registration, like who's advertising in town, lists from the state that you have to be licensed for certain types of practices for pesticide application, and then just driving around town and seeing the names on the truck. So we have a list that we think might be pretty close to how many are doing business, about 70 to 80 different companies. So, and that ranges from an independent contractor who's maybe just one employee to the larger regional national chains. So that's kind of the universe we have to work with to educate and to help them know about the rules and get them to comply.
Can I add just one thing there? And that is that it also comes down to, right, the property owner and the resident hiring, you're the consumer, right? So only hiring registered landscapers. So those registered landscapers with the proposed new process or new ordinances, revised ordinances, amended ordinances would receive the education, right? So that's another thing. As consumers here in town, we can make sure that we are doing our just part, which is to only hire registered landscapers.
You bring up, Scott, an important issue with regard to the many institutions of many different kinds. And I'm hoping that the institutions could be a major factor in making significant changes. Just as an example, I am near the Westminster Choir College, which, even though it is essentially unoccupied at the moment for other reasons, the landscaping is done all the time, and they use leaf blowers for about 4 hours a day, sometimes 6, several times a week, and they use the most powerful equipment. Businesses use leaf blowers on Nassau Street. Churches in the center of town use leaf blowers on the streets and around the streets. The schools have a tremendously large amount of property. The university, of course, has a huge property. But these are all organizations that, once they have clued into the program and realize what they need to do, they will do it. Meanwhile, Eve is, I know, already working on trying to get the municipality to set an example. It is certainly highly desirable that our municipality be a flagship in this regard. So yes, I think the institutions need a lot of attention, and the plan is to give it.
And I believe that the town actually has purchased a couple electric, and they are working with those. So they're on board.
Thank you, Scott, for your question. And can we bring on the next person? And Christine, are there questions in the chat that do not come from people that have already spoken? Do you want to do a quick inventory? And after this next person, maybe you can read those if there.
Okay, we're looking at Charles.
Hi, my name's Charles
Okay.
Carney. I'm just going to underline a couple of points that have been made, maybe give a little different take. I would like to point out that the Princeton Noise Ordinance arguably prohibits gas-powered leaf blowers already. The wording is really pretty general. If it does any noise disturbs my repose, it's prohibited. Leaf blowers are mentioned, but they have to be muffled so as to deaden the noise. And that's not any leaf blowers I've heard. So when I hear 3 leaf blowers going at the same time for 3 hours some morning, I'm disturbed, and I think that should be prohibited by the existing noise ordinance. Now, who's responsible for seeing that happens? I think it's the person hiring the landscaping company. They are requiring their workers to do this, and the burden should be on them to abide by the ordinance. And if it costs extra or they get less job, not exactly their job they wanted done, that's on them. The last point I want to make is that part of the enforcement and buy-in from the landscapers depends on uniform enforcement. And I'm kind of shocked when I tried to find the list of registered landscapers on the Princeton NJ site to find only completely out-of-date information. So what's going on? I mean, it's
we're
already a
very-
requirement, and why isn't it being enforced as of yesterday,
Yes, you're absolutely right. And none of this is going to be possible if we don't have enforcement, and we are actively talking about how to do this on this initiative as well as others. So the plan is to really have require our companies to register and make sure that companies that are not registered are informed that they need to, and that the registry can be used to steer people to those companies, so that it's an advantage to be registered with the municipality. So that's a work in progress. That it's a long story to explain what happened, but the person who was responsible left, and the person who was then assigned the responsibility did not really follow through on it. So that's, on us, that's on the municipality to make sure that that people are following through on what they're supposed to do. And I'd like to see someone in this role who is really committed to it. And we're going to be talking about that as part of our larger discussion about enforcement. I don't think the way you interpret the current ordinance is the way it's generally interpreted. Tony and I had a very interesting discussion about mufflers, which are essentially a fantasy, I think, and maybe Tony, you want to say just a couple of words about that. So that, I think, is language that we need to get rid of, because to suggest that people do something that is simply not possible, a technology that doesn't exist, is we're going to try to make the noise ordinance much more like to be read by normal people who can understand it, rather than sort of gobbledygook.
You covered that very well about the mufflers. There, you just can't go into a shop and say, "Oh, please give me a muffler for my leaf blower." It doesn't work that way. I would like to mention the issue of enforcement. This is of considerable concern, because without proper, I do feel that education is even more important, but without proper enforcement, we will also not succeed. The old system of enforcement, and I have tried this as a resident for decades, was you would call up, in this case it would be the police. In the future, we do not wish the police to do this. We want another agency to be the enforcer. But the police would say, well, yeah, okay, we'll come. George, you available? No, well, okay. And 35 minutes later, a car will pull up, by which time the leaf blowing has stopped, and or the leaf blower sees the police car coming, and stops that second. you cannot enforce ordinances of this kind that way. That is why there's a considerable amount of interest in using the modern iPhone or equivalent to take a picture to document that this has been happening. Eve has found that there are significant difficulties in actually doing that, but I hope we can figure out ways to do it, because I think we also need to talk to Washington, D.C., Larchmont, New York, and several other places that have more strict bans, who have actually banned them altogether, to see how they manage to do their enforcement. So we have work to do at our end.
I would also just following up on the person who asked about the interest on the part of homeowners. My guess is that a lot of we have neighbors who use leaf blowers, and whose landscapers use leaf blowers, and my guess is they sort of practically wouldn't notice if less leaf blowing were done, or if they had to pay an extra $20 a visit to use less powerful stuff. So I kind of sort of do worry a little bit about the people who are sort of absent and don't care. But a lot of those people who don't care, I don't think it's probably such a burden on them just to say, well, landscaping now is this rather than that, and here's the bill.
I think, Charles, you're right. I think a lot of people just kind of look around and they see what their neighbors do, and that's what they think is
well, and maybe the landscapers make the choice for them.
I think the landscapers, in our conversations with the landscapers, overwhelmingly, it was over and over and over, they do what the customer wants, and what the customer wants is what John and on the one side, and whatever their other neighbor on the other side. So
if I could elaborate, I think what they mean is like the customer wants you to be fast, efficient, and leave me a pristine sort of lawn. That's what they want, someone that is cheap and efficient
and inexpensive
and expensive. And the tools that they use are the tools that exist and are available and ubiquitous.
Yes,
just like
I
transportation.
Wonder how, in reality, how picky the average resident who doesn't venture out into his garden that much actually cares whether everything's blown away or not.
Right.
Even. I mean, if
we'll
you just blew the driveway only, that would be much quicker and less pollution, everything. And I would say a lot of people wouldn't notice if suddenly that was all that was being done. Okay.
Thank you, Charles. We're gonna move on to that.
Just as if the prices do go up, they will be because it may take longer to use a leaf blower to do electric leaf blower to do as thorough a job as a gasoline one. But that isn't really what we want to do. But the leaf blowers cost maybe 5% of the total machine inventory that a landscaper has. So even if we have to double the cost of leaf blowers, and it's not going to be that bad, it's not going to be a huge price increase because of that, and the leaf blowers will actually save the landscapers money in the long run. So that should in the long run lead to a price reduction. We had a plumber recently to do a new furnace, and he said, oh, well, you got to have a chimney liner now. Yeah, that's to be $650. Oh. And you just do it. You don't have any choice. So let's not make too much of a mountain out of this issue. It is something that we can deal with. People can adapt to new regulations.
Okay. Adam, do you want to bring on the next person? Thank you again, Charles.
Yes, bringing in John.
John, you can unmute, and good job.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm John Howler. I'm actually on this subcommittee, and I was asked to join it because I'm on the Princeton Human Services Commission, where I'm the chair of the immigration subcommittee. So in some ways, I try to represent the interests of immigrants. I think, as Christine said, we probably have 70 to 80 landscaping companies doing business in town. Many of them are small operations, one owner and maybe anywhere from 3 to 6 employees. And I will tell you that I've learned so much from being on the subcommittee since January. And I really agree with almost everything that the subcommittee is working toward. We do need changes, and we need education of homeowners for sure. I'm a little uncomfortable about people taking videos of each other and posting them somewhere. I remember when I visited Germany some years ago and went to the Stasi Museum, and there we had examples of 1 out of every 5 people, I hate to use a word, ratting on their neighbors. But anyway, here's the main point. And Eve mentioned this, and I thank her for that. The months when gas-powered leaf blowers would be allowed is not finalized by any means. And I would just like the people in the audience to understand that the months that were shown may shrink, but they also may be expanded slightly. I've lived on 2 different sides of town, and I can tell you that the leaf fall, the heavy leaf fall, starts way before October 15th, probably October 1st, in some cases, depending on weather. And of course, it's getting more so even as early as late September. And in the spring, we have many homeowners. Again, maybe education is needed. But many homeowners want thorough cleanup starting in like mid to late March. So the survey that's gone out now, we hope we get a good response, is really asking the landscape owners, mostly Latino, mostly small, to give us their input on what they could live with. And again, there'll have to be some compromise between what they feel they could live with and what proponents of less noise want. But I guess my main point is that the 4 months that were, I think, displayed somewhere in the presentation are absolutely not the final answer. And I think within about a week or so, we'll get all the survey responses we're going to get. And then the subcommittee will be meeting again to try to finalize the months when gas-powered leaf blowers would be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that perspective. Appreciate it.
Okay, bringing on Lisa.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, please.
Okay. I just wanted to say I'm a Princeton resident, and I'm extremely happy to hear everything I've been hearing tonight. I'm excited about the fact that you've made the progress that you've made already. It seems amazing that we're going to have this ordinance, and I'm very, very excited about the idea of extending it, and that it's only a first step, and that eventually we might get to a total gas leaf blower ban. I think that would be great. I'm also very happy to hear, I really, really want to stop the noise. I'm also very, very concerned about the sustainability issues that I'm hearing about tonight. And I'm very happy that the social justice element is being brought in, even if it does slow matters down or whatever. I think it's important for us to put all these things together, as it will be with all kinds of climate issues that we face. And just, I've spoken before, so I'm not going to go into great detail about my own personal situation, but just to say briefly that my husband works at home. So his work is writing, and a lot of noise isn't great for that. His other work is that he videotapes conversations that are posted on the internet. And if there's a little bit of a truck goes by or something, it's fine. But if there's a major noise that goes on and on for hours, as can happen with the gas leaf blowers, that can be very problematic. And then for me, it's a health concern because I have a movement disorder that is triggered by different things, but particularly badly by noise. When it's triggered, it makes me absolutely dysfunctional and physically uncomfortable. So obviously I'm really eager to have noise be reduced. And we happen to live, we live on Prospect near a lot of other houses. So it's not even just when your neighbor is blowing their leaves. It's when they moved on to the neighbor behind us, the neighbor on the other side, and 2 houses over, and it's all still audible, even indoors with the window shut and everything. So anyway, we're, for all those reasons, we're interested. I also totally agree about the plastic lawns, and I would love to see more of what Alice was talking about. And but anyway, I just wanted to say I'm thrilled with how things are going now, and I'm delighted that everybody is just saying it's a first step. And I'm glad that we're including everyone in the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate the support, and I know you're deeply affected by this, and I think all of us are committed to moving away from this really damaging, polluting in terms of noise and air technology, in the long run. And I think if we get 8 months a year without it, that's a big step in the right direction. So thank you for your comments.
Lisa, thank you for flying the QP banner this evening on your monitor there. I just mentioned that in addition to the problems that you have had, other Quiet Princeton members have had the following problems. One, years ago, actually had to move out of her house and get a temporary accommodation a little bit further away during the periods when extensive leaf blowing was going on near her. It was that bad for her. And another one moved out of the town, and she told us anyway that was the only reason why she moved out of the town. So you, Lisa, are one of several people, we don't know how many, who are very significantly affected. As you say, it's not a minor inconvenience.
Thank you, Tony. I think I saw one more question, and then I did look through the chat and have a couple of other questions that we can answer. But I think one more person had their hand up. Is that right, Adam?
Yes, we have Richard with his hand up here.
Hey, Richard.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Good. We can hear you. Thank you.
Tony, thanks for all your time again tonight. Appreciate it. I'll be brief. So I don't want to go into big details about what my background is. Folks can go to the last town council meeting when I gave a rather lengthy introduction of myself on that. So if they wanted to, they can go check out that YouTube video. But just briefly, I'm a 30-year green industry pro, and I've been working in the Princeton area since 1995, and transitioned our company to organic, ecological, and sustainable practices in 2005. And we are currently working with AGSA to transition our company to all battery powered equipment. So I can touch, I saw a note about Sustainable Princeton possibly offsetting some of the costs. So one of the things I do is I work with the New Jersey Nursery and Landscape Association and the New Jersey Landscape Contractors Association, who we've been working with together with the NJGIC, which is the sort of the lobby for the green industry in Trenton. And there is a proposal going to Trenton from the NJGIC that will address bans on gas backpack blowers, and also some sort of subsidy or some kind of monetary help from the state to contractors that want to be use gas powered equipment, or sorry, battery powered equipment. So that's happening. So I think it's a really good thing. Again, I love what you guys are doing. I think the way you're handling this is fantastic, bringing the landscape industry to the table, to talk to the community, to talk to the landscape people in the community, I think is great. To the people that are on this call that live in Princeton, and if you're outside the Princeton area, it's just something to think about moving forward. When we talk about education, it's important to realize that they need to vet their contractors, and they need to understand what their contractors are doing on their property. And I'm sure some folks are aware of it. Some might not be. There's a thing out there called greenwashing, and there will be some contractors that will claim to do something they're not supposed to So I would suggest very strongly that when folks do reach out to an ecological organic landscape contractor, that they vet them thoroughly, find out the materials that they're using on their property, do Google searches, find out that those materials are truly organic, and that they've been vetted through OMRI or some other sort of vetting situation. I think the idea of this being a one and done 25-year, if you don't do it now, get it over with thing is from my standpoint, I don't see that happening. I think there's a lot of momentum in the green industry to accommodate for our customers. But I do think it's imperative on the community to keep the pressure on the landscape contractors to keep demanding they improve the quality of work that you're getting on your properties. Just to leave it at this and just say we're good and be done, I don't think that's a good thing. So, and then just one other point I have, and it came up, and I noticed at the last town council meeting, the idea of augmenting the brush and leaf cleanup. I understand the idea of leaving the leaves on the curb for pickup, probably not the most environmentally sound way to do things. However, it is a good function in a way to get rid of this material, because it does go to Lawrenceville to be composted, and people can get that material back and use it in their garden. So I think out of everything that you're doing, I don't know that this is one of the priorities. I think everything else would take a priority because you have that system in place to get rid of these leaves. And I think it's a good thing. Granted, it's not going to, we've had that compost tested because we use it. And it's fairly good compost. It's pretty clean and it's got some good biology in it. It's fairly good compost. So I think doing away with that would be possibly more of a disservice than not. So I think that might be something, again, I know there's still more discussions to be had, but I think that's something that really needs to be built down a little bit further. So thank you again. I appreciate all your work, everybody. And I appreciate the folks in Princeton that are here on this call. So good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard, and appreciate your comments about the leaf and brush program. And definitely, it's not going to be a one size fits all. I think one concern, and Tammy from the Environmental Commission can speak to this as well, is that they get into our storm sewers. So to the extent that we continue with the program, there certainly needs to be stricter adherence to, you can only put them out the day before. They shouldn't be sitting in the street for a month to go into the storm sewers where they cause all kinds of other problems. But it might be, as I said, not a one size fits all solution. So if you have a little 1/8 of an acre or 1/4 acre plot towards the center of town, that might be a different system than if you have a 4-acre property up on the ridge. So that will probably be next year. Tammy, looks like you have a comment, or?
Yeah, I do. And that's because it's not only been about leaves down the inlets, right? So it's actually been very devastational. And I can attest to it because it happened to me. It happened to one of my neighbors who's on this call, I believe. When leaves are placed on the inlets where they're not supposed to be, and there's actually a DEP regulation, 10 feet at least, and when they're not, and we have storms or even rain, people's homes flood here. Our downtown flooded because that. Our sewer engineer has, equated a lot of these flooding issues in our streets and our roads are because of the leaf and brush pickup. So yes, and what PEC is recommending is that we definitely reevaluate it, right? So to reevaluate it, and just to say that it's not only about the leaves going down the drains, it's about a much bigger issue in Princeton.
Thank you for clarifying. And Christine, I think you wanted to jump in.
A couple things. First, the question, Richard, that you're referring to, I think was council considering subsidizing landscaping companies' purchase? Elaborate on that a little bit. But also to your point about, if you're employing a landscaper, you should, you think thoughtfully about the type of practices that they're using, but also, are they providing their workers with safety equipment? Are they taking good care of their workers? Are they paying them a fair wage? Are they registered with the municipality? That registration that John Heilner spent and his colleagues spent a lot of time putting in place in 2014 was an effort to protect workers against wage theft. So as consumers and as clients of landscaping companies, it's more than just the type of practices they do for the environment, it's the practices they do for their workers that as a consumer, you have the ability to influence by what you demand. And to the point about subsidizing, not subsidizing, in addition to the advocacy work that Richard McCoy is doing and others at the state, there's a number of folks very committed to this issue, some that are on this call, that are working at a state level to encourage the Board of Public Utilities, the Department of Environmental Protection, other organizations and institutions to help with funding the transition. Other states do this, but there's nothing currently in New Jersey. So, we're trying to pursue those avenues to see what's possible. The state is helping to fund the transition to electric vehicles. So you would think similarly, it would help fund the transition away from gas-powered equipment.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really important point. We don't have, and thank you for your speaking to the human side, so to speak, of the registry. That originally it was to stop wage theft, and one of the suggestions that we're going to implement in the new ordinance is not just a box where people check off that they have workman's comp insurance, but actually to be required to show that they have, to prove that they have workman's comp insurance, again, so that a worker doesn't get injured on the job only to learn that their employer who said they had workman's comp does not actually have it. So we really want to protect the companies that are playing by the rules and the workers, so they don't end up, being victims of someone who is operating unscrupulously, if that's a word. So I just wanted to, in terms of subsidizing, Princeton Council, the municipality, we're not able to do that, but there is funding, as Christine said, from the Department of Environmental Protection, potentially the Board of Public Utilities, potentially there could be a bill in the state, although that would take some time. Richard spoke to what some of the landscaping associations are doing. So this is something that, we are pursuing in various forms, and is, we think, given the detrimental effects of this equipment, would really benefit everybody to have a process where people who want to replace their equipment have some assistance in doing so. I just want to address a couple of questions I saw in the chat before we let you all go. One is a date for a total ban. We don't have that date. A lot of it would depend on the transition of landscapers to other equipment, as well as our success in convincing people to change the way they care for their lawn, so that landscaping companies don't feel that they need to use the gas leaf blowers in order to take care of their customers' lawns. So that is on all of us, and nothing better that those of you still here on the call can do, but reach out to your friends and neighbors and encourage them to start thinking about ways to be part of this process. And the other effect, Mark, who I think is no longer on the call, had a question about the echo effect of leaf blowers, I guess, when there are multiple ones in use, and that's not something we are taking on directly at this time, is limiting, like saying you can only use 2 leaf blowers on a property or something, but maybe that will be something that will be picked up in the future. And Christine, did I miss any of the questions that were in the chat?
I think you got them all.
Okay.
There's this actually, there was one, and it was early on, and about doing your lawn care. So just to be sure that for this first step, it doesn't mean that other lawn care can't be happening, right? So on these days, right, it's the noise, the noise powered air pollution and noise pollution equipment right now in this first step, right? So it doesn't mean that you can't go out and you can't weed your garden or anything like that. I don't want people to go away thinking that it's restrictive, that other lawn care can't be being done during this time. This is specifically for the chainsaws and the gas leaf blower. So I just wanted to clarify that because I did see something early on.
Alrighty, and I think, Christine, do we have one more slide about next steps?
Yes, we do. Give me one second.
And I'll just encourage, if you want to contact us through the municipal website, you can submit a question or a comment through Access Princeton and just put the title Sustainable Landscaping, and that will come to me. And I will make sure that the group sees it and addresses it. So yeah, so there's a municipal newsletter. If you don't get that, please sign up for it, because that's a good way of staying informed. And Christine, do you want to do the rest of this?
Sure. For those of you who answered the question that you use the landscaper, I think there were a few of you, please make sure they are registered with the municipality. Talk to them about changing the practices if you haven't already. We want to facilitate, conversations between landscapers and property owners so that they're working on this issue together. Please encourage them to sign up for the AGSA workshop that we're having on August 24th.
Christine, I'm sorry, can you explain what AGSA is and what that workshop consists
Sure.
of?
It is a national organization called the American Green Zone Alliance. They are really on the forefront of helping landscaping companies from the very smallest to the largest transition to more sustainable practices, particularly with the equipment, and giving them the opportunity to understand how you incorporate that equipment into your business so that you can maintain a profitable business and attract more customers. So it's a half-day workshop where you get to actually test out and try out the commercial lawn maintenance equipment that AGSA brings in manufacturers to bring their equipment so they can try it out.
I'm just going to throw in one thing, Christine, which there is some limited stipend money.
Correct. For private landscapers, yes, there is a stipend for participation. We recognize that for some of the crew and the workers and owners, time is money. And that if they're going to be attending a workshop, they might not be earning money to put food on their table. So there will be, for the first 60 participants, a stipend for the day. And if you are a landscaper and you're still on this call, please register with the municipality. Please sign up for the workshop. You can contact Sustainable Princeton with more details about the workshop, and we'll help you get registered.
And I just want to, Richard McCoy just asked me to read this clarification that was in the chat. The NJGIC has approved a draft legislative proposal, but it's not official or final. So like many of the efforts to look for support, financial support for this, it's something that's in the works. So I think we're done. Please stay in touch. Thank you to all the panelists. I think this has been a really good discussion. And I'm sure there'll be more. At some point we'll be presenting these recommendations to council. So please feel free to come to the public hearing for which I don't know when that'll be, but if you get the municipal newsletter, if you follow Sustainable Princeton, you'll hear about those dates, and maybe we'll also send a letter to the editor to get that information out there. So again, thank you to everyone who attended and to all our panelists. And Adam, thanks for masterminding everything.
And
Pleasure.
Charo for
thank you to Charo for translation.
Yeah, thank you, Charo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Good night.